Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare,
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishnaya Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swami Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Sunyavadi Paschatyatishatarine Gaura Bhaktivedanta Gaura Bhaktivedanta Gaura Bhaktivedanta Krishna Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare Krishna Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare,
Namaste Narasimhaya. Namaste Narasimhaya. Pradadadadadayine. Hiranyakashi Purvakshaha. Shiratan Kanakalaya. Hito Nishimgo Parato Nishimgo. Yato Yato Yamitai to Nishimgo. Bahir Nishimgo Hridaya Nishimgo. Narasimha Madhim Sharanam Prapadya. Tavakaram Kamalavare Nahakam Adbhuta Singam Darita Hiranyakashipu Tanubringa Keshavadrita Narahari Rupa Jai Jagadisha Hare. Jai Jagadisha Hare. Jai Jagadisha Hare. Jayo Narasimhadev, Jayo Narasimhadev, Narasimhadev, Jayo Narasimhadev. Jayo Prahat Maharaj, Prahat Maharaj, Prahat Maharaj, Jayo Prahat Maharaj. Jayo Prabhupada, Jayo Prabhupada, Jayo Prabhupada, Srila Prabhupada. Sri Narasimha Bhagavan ki, Prahlad Maharaj ki, Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Yashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Yashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jamuna Tira Vanachari Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare Prabhupada, Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Reading from Bhagavad Gita, chapter 4, text 42. Tasmad ajnana sambhutam hridstanam jnana sinatmanaha chidvainam samshayam yogam adishtot ishtabharata. Tasmat ajnana sambhutam hridstam jnana sinatmanaha chidvainam samshayam yogam atishtot ishtabharata. Sorry. Okay. Word for word translation. Tasmat, therefore. Ajnana sambhutam, born of ignorance. Hridstam, situated in the heart. Jnana, of knowledge. Asina, by the weapon. Atmanaha, of the self. Chitva, cutting off. Enam, this. Samshayam, doubt. Yogam, in yoga. Atishtha, be situated. Utishtha, stand up to fight. Bharata, O descendant of Bharata. Translation. Therefore, the doubts which have arisen in your heart out of ignorance should be slashed by the weapon of knowledge. Armed with yoga, O Bharata, stand and fight. Purport by His Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada. The yoga system instructed in this chapter is called Sanatana Yoga, or eternal activities performed by the living entity. This yoga has two divisions of sacrificial actions. One is called sacrifice of one's material possessions, and the other is called knowledge of self, which is pure spiritual activity. If sacrifice of one's material possessions is not dovetailed for spiritual realization, then such sacrifice becomes material. But one who performs such sacrifices with a spiritual objective or in devotional service makes a perfect sacrifice. When we come to spiritual activities, we find that these are also divided into two, namely, understanding of one's own self or one's constitutional position, and the truth regarding the Supreme Personality of Godhead. One who follows the path of Bhagavad Gita as it is can very easily understand these two important divisions of spiritual knowledge. For him, there is no difficulty in obtaining perfect knowledge of the self as part and parcel of the Lord. And such understanding is beneficial, for such a person can easily understand the transcendental activities of the Lord. In the beginning of this chapter, the transcendental activities of the Lord were discussed by the Supreme Lord himself. One who does not understand the instructions of the Gita is faithless, and is to be considered to be misusing the fragmental independence awarded to him by the Lord. In spite of such instructions, one who does not understand the real nature of the Lord as the eternal, blissful, all-knowing personality of Godhead is certainly fool number one. Ignorance can be removed by gradual acceptance of the principles of Krishna consciousness. Krishna consciousness is awakened by different types of sacrifices to the demigods. Sacrifice to Brahman, sacrifice in celibacy, in household life, in controlling the senses, in practicing mystic yoga, in penance, in foregoing material possessions, in studying the Vedas, and in partaking of the social institution called Varnashram Dharma. All of these are known as sacrifice, and all of them are based on regulated action. But within all these activities, the important factor is self-realization. One who seeks that objective is the real student of Bhagavad Gita. But one who doubts the authority of Krishna falls back. One is therefore advised to study Bhagavad Gita or any other scripture under a bona fide spiritual master with service and surrender. A bona fide spiritual master is in the disciplic succession from time eternal, and he does not deviate at all from the instructions of the Supreme Lord, as they were imparted millions of years ago to the Sun God, from whom the instructions of Bhagavad Gita have come down to the earthly kingdom. One should, therefore, follow the path of Bhagavad Gita as it is expressed in the Gita itself, and beware of self-interested people, after personal aggrandizement, who deviate others from the actual path. The Lord is definitely the Supreme Person, and his activities are transcendental. One who understands this is a liberated person from the very beginning of his study of Bhagavad Gita. Thus ends the Bhaktivedanta purports of the 4th chapter of the Srimad Bhagavad Gita in the matter of transcendental knowledge. Om Ajnana Timirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurum Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Svayam Rupa Gadamayam Dadati Svapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Parakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathan Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Sahab Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Pada Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakan Vitamscha Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gourangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sutta Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vancha Kalpa Tarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhaktavrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna. There's no one here in the temple room, but hopefully maybe there's one or two people listening online. So we are at the end of the 4th chapter now of the Bhagavad Gita. And so I thought I would, if my phone is going to cooperate. Yes. I thought I would give a quick overview of chapter 4. So it begins by Krishna. He's saying that he instructed this science of transcendental knowledge to the sun god, and it was passed down in disciplic succession, but at some point this succession was broken, and so now that's the reason that he's going to speak it to Arjuna, to re-establish this Guru Parampara. And the reason, he said, is that Arjuna is his devotee and his dear friend, and that means that he can understand this science. And then Arjuna is confused about how Krishna could have instructed the sun god when the sun god appears to be have taken birth before Krishna. And then Krishna goes to explain that although both him and Arjuna have been through many births, Arjuna can't remember them because his body is temporary, whereas Krishna has this Satchitananda body, and so he can remember every time that he appears in this world, he appears in his same body, and so he can remember all of those births. And then he explains the reasons that he comes to this earth as well. This famous verse, Paritranai Sadhunam Vinashaya Chaduskrutam Dhammasam Stapanataya Sambhavami Yuge Yuge. So he comes to annihilate the miscreants, to deliver the pious, and to re-establish the principles of religion. And he also begins to explain how to attain the eternal abode, and that's by knowledge of him, and we become purified by this knowledge, this transcendental knowledge. And then verse 11, he says, according to how much we surrender, that's how much we're rewarded. And so most men desire fruitive work, and so they worship the demigods. That's verse 12. And then Krishna's saying that although he creates these 4 divisions, the Varnashram system, in human society, he's not affected by it, he's detached from it. And if we can understand this about Krishna, then we are free from karmic reactions. So we can already see kind of a theme developing in chapter 4, which is the more that we know about Krishna, the more that we can understand about this spiritual knowledge about Krishna, we will be free from sinful reactions and will become liberated. Okay, and then after this, Krishna goes on to explain what is action and what is inaction. And he describes a man with real knowledge. Verses 18 to 23, he says that it's a man in Krishna consciousness who's devoid of selfish desire for sense gratification. He doesn't have attachment to the results of his activities, and so he has no karma. His mind and intelligence are controlled. He acts for the bare necessities of life, and so he doesn't have sinful reactions. He's free from duality. He doesn't envy, and he's unattached to the modes. And this person who's fully absorbed in Krishna consciousness will attain the supreme destination. And then Krishna talks about different types of sacrifice. And he gives some examples like the yogis, brahmacharis, and householders, the different types of sacrifice they should perform. And afterwards he says if someone understands the actual meaning of sacrifice, this relieves them of their sinful reactions. And then they can become happy in this life and in the next. So he's saying that even in this life, the only way that we can actually become happy is by performing sacrifice. And then it will also lead us to a better destination in the next life. And also sacrifice, he says, gives us transcendental knowledge. Okay, and then he moves on to talk about the importance of the spiritual master. Because he gives us the truth and real knowledge. And he talks a bit about the power of transcendental knowledge. So this was earlier in the week, the classes. It says that transcendental knowledge turns firewood to ashes. If you have this knowledge, you can cross the ocean of miseries. It's sublime knowledge and it's pure. And then faith gives us knowledge, but doubting will lead to a fall down. And then just in yesterday's verse, it was saying that one who has destroyed his doubts by this knowledge is not bound by the reactions of his work. Okay, and then on to today's verse. So I'm just going to read the translation again. Therefore, the doubts which have arisen in your heart out of ignorance should be slashed by the weapon of knowledge. Armed with yoga, O Bharata, stand and fight. Okay, so Krishna is indicating in this verse that doubts come from a place of ignorance. So that's my understanding of the translation is that, yes, doubts come from a place of ignorance. And to defeat this ignorance, we need knowledge. And not any knowledge, we need transcendental knowledge. And what does transcendental knowledge mean? Prabhupada explains in the purport that it's knowledge that I am part and parcel of the Lord. And then, once we understand this, we can easily understand the transcendental activities of the Lord also. And as we learned from our summary of chapter 4, if we can understand the transcendental nature and activities of the Lord, then we can reach the supreme destination. Okay. So now I'm going to pick out a few words from the translation that kind of stood out to me. And I'm going to just kind of pick them apart and try and explain how they're important in relation to this verse and what Krishna is actually meaning. Okay, so first, weapon. The weapon of knowledge. Krishna calls it a weapon. This really struck me. And I was thinking about how someone feels if they're holding a weapon, an actual weapon. I was thinking about, if someone breaks into your house, for example, you're hearing them downstairs, maybe, and you're wondering who's this, an intruder. The first thing you're going to think about is, I want to defend myself. So you would grab something to defend yourself, some weapon, even if you don't have let's say a knife or a gun, but you just you find something to defend yourself with, and it makes you feel more safe and secure. That's how you'd feel when you're holding it. And if someone is attacking us physically, then we look for a way to defend ourselves. And so we should have the same attitude towards this ignorance. We need to find a way to defend ourselves against ignorance, against Maya, because as Krishna says in this verse, that ignorance leads to doubts, and doubts are an obstacle in accepting this transcendental knowledge. Yeah, so again, back to this image of the weapon. If someone else is holding a weapon, we'll be very scared and we, run a mile. If you see someone holding a weapon, especially if they point it towards you, you're going to run away as quickly as you can, if you don't have anything to defend yourself with. And so that's how we should feel against Maya. We should we should be very afraid. But this weapon, this transcendental knowledge, is so powerful that if we have this weapon, then Maya will not, she'll not interfere. And like I said, if somebody has a weapon, the other people will run a mile. This is the same. This weapon of transcendental knowledge will make Maya run a mile. So even just showing the weapon will make someone run a mile. So just by hearing this transcendental knowledge can slash our doubts. Even if we haven't fully assimilated it, even just by hearing it, it can help us to diminish our doubts. Yes, and so in chapter 1, Arjuna, his doubts are are so much that he puts down his physical weapons. So Arjuna is obviously fighting a physical fight as well, and his doubts are so overwhelming him that he's put down his bow. This is a very special bow, Gandiva bow, and he also had 2 inexhaustible quivers of arrows, this bow was as tall as a man, and it was flawless. This is from Mahabharata. And when he fired it, it was like a sound like the crash of thunder resounded through the forest, terrifying all of the creatures. And he also had a chariot gifted to him. This was by Agni. She asked Varuna to gift Arjuna this chariot, which was yoked with golden harnesses to silvery steeds from the land of the Gandharvas. These horses were capable of going anywhere within all the worlds and can move with the speed of the wind or the mind. Above the chariot flew a banner bearing an image of Hanuman. So these were all signs of victory for the Pandavas, for Arjuna. He had the best weapons, and he had this flag of Hanuman and the chariot. And he was given these weapons, as a Kshatriya, he was given these weapons to be able to defeat the enemy. But he was so overwhelmed that he decided, no, I don't want to fight. Yeah, in his ignorance, actually, as well. And it shows how strong doubts can be. You know, everything is on your side, and you're just performing your duty, and it can actually stop you from just performing the work that should be your nature. And so Arjuna, he couldn't fight the outer war, he had to fight this inner war first. And Krishna had to slash his doubts, so we're talking about doubts. And before Arjuna could even begin, before he could even pick up his bow, because he's cast aside his bow, before he could even pick up his bow, he had to fight the war, the inner war, and Krishna had to explain this to him, how to slash his doubts. Yes. So he's saying, yes, this is interesting. So Krishna is saying that armed with yoga, Arjuna, he's not saying armed with your Gandiva bow, he's saying armed with yoga. So this is our most important weapon. We hear how this Gandiva bow is so transcendental, but he's saying armed with yoga, Arjuna. It's our most powerful weapon. And I was thinking about this in relation to devotional life, and how what weapons do we think that we have? You know, we think we have some ability or intelligence, and that we own that. But actually, Krishna is saying here that transcendental knowledge is our most valuable weapon. And without that, you know, we can't use any of our other abilities for good use anyway. If we're using our intelligence in something that's not Krishna consciousness, then it's going to have no ultimate benefit. So our most valuable weapon is this bhakti yoga. And then the next word from the purport that I'm going to talk about is the heart. Because Krishna says these doubts that have arisen in your heart, Arjuna. And I found this quite interesting, because when you think about the heart, you think about something, maybe you have kind of connotations of something positive, love. And I was thinking, Krishna's in the heart, so, how can doubts arise in the heart? I was slightly confused, and I looked to other places in the Bhagavad Gita where there was Krishna was saying similar things about difficulties in the heart, or being kind of heartbroken. And so in chapter 1, the conch shells of the Pandavas said to shatter the hearts of the sons of Dhritarashtra. And Srila Prabhupada in the purport says that there was no heartbreaking on the side of the Pandavas. But there was obviously heartbreak on the side of the Kauravas by the blowing of the conch shells of the Pandavas. And he then goes on to explain that one who takes shelter of Krishna has nothing to fear. So this suggests maybe that when we are not taking shelter of Krishna, then our heart is disturbed, actually. And that's why the Kauravas, their hearts are shattered, because the Pandavas' conch shells are transcendental, and indicating that Krishna is behind them. And then the next place is, again, in the first chapter, 37 to 38. Arjuna says, O Janardhan, although these men, their hearts overtaken by greed, see no fault in killing one's family or quarrelling with friends. Why should we kill them, he says. So again, it's talking about how when the heart has been overwhelmed by some difficult emotion or some difficulty. And then in chapter 2, Krishna, when he's trying to chivvy Arjuna up, he's saying, give up such petty weakness of heart and arise, O chastiser of the enemy. And in chapter 2, verse 7, it's not in the actual translation, but in the word for word. It's Kaponya dosho vahatasva bhava, brichami tvam dharma samudha cheta. Yachtraya shan nischitam bruhitame shishyasteham satimam tvam prapanam. So he's saying that he's bewildered about his duty, and he's lost all composure due to miserly weakness. That's how it's in the full translation. It's translated as miserly weakness, but in the word for word it's saying bewildered in heart. So both of these examples are showing, yes, weakness of heart. And so, yes, all of these examples of having these difficulties within the heart, it's when somebody's stumbling or they're feeling overwhelmed or just completely broken inside. Is when someone says they're broken-hearted, it means, somebody's completely torn them apart. It's kind of the deepest thing you can think of. Something from the heart is something, these are the words I wrote down when I thought of when you give something from your heart, it's something very deep and meaningful. It's very emotive and devotional as well, actually. And so these examples of when someone's, these doubts that have come in Arjuna's heart, as the verse from today is saying. Yes, it comes from a very deeply emotional place. When we're not on top of our emotions, it affects us very deeply. And so it's showing, how Arjuna's doubts were going very, very deeply. If it's from his heart, it was something very deep. Yes. And I was thinking about, in today's world, at least I think especially in this country, there's this stereotype of British skeptic. We're almost trained to not believe what people are saying, not to trust people, to challenge and question in a confrontational way. And to have doubts just about everything. And it's not so conducive for spiritual life. When you come to spiritual life, we obviously we're trying to do the opposite. We're trying to not challenge. We're obviously, if we have doubts, then we try and clear them by submissive questioning. But it's just that it's submissive, which is completely the opposite to how we've been trained in the material world. But we should try to find solace in the scripture. We should be able to believe the scripture, but we don't even believe the words of God. These are the words of God, and we're even doubting this. And it's because of this training, this bad training from the outside world and from past lives as well, probably. It means that even when we know something has come directly from God, that we're even doubting, is this really true? And Prabhupada says in the purport here that one who does not understand the instructions of the Gita is faithless. So when we're not understanding what the Lord is saying, that's a question of our faith. Or when we're not fully absorbing what the Lord is saying, that's a question of our faith. And it means that we don't have determination to follow the path. Maya's greatest weapon, one of her greatest weapons, is doubt. Because by doubt, that can turn us away from the whole process, actually. So it's very important that we that we clear our doubts, actually. And we can do this by the association of devotees, especially senior devotees, asking our questions, our doubts, and not to be kind of embarrassed about that as well. Yes, and if we are fully surrendered, then we'll have full faith and we'll be able to accept what Krishna says without any doubt. And Prabhupada also says in the purport that gradual acceptance, how we clear our doubts, is by gradual acceptance of the principles of Krishna consciousness. And so this includes varnashram and sacrifice, he says. So for varnashram, so it's supposed to be a system that accelerates the transcendental qualities of the individual person. So obviously, if we're acquiring more transcendental qualities, or they're becoming more pronounced in our character, then we're going to be able to accept things. We're going to be able to accept this transcendental knowledge more freely, more easily. Not going to be so challenging. And then, this will help us to come to the ultimate destination. In terms of sacrifice, this is also called regulated action in the purport. Prabhupada calls it regulated action. And he also specifies two types of sacrifice in the purport. So one type was sacrificing our material things, and that should only be with the aim of progressing spiritually. So it's not, not for pride. It's only sacrifice as much as is conducive for our spiritual advancement. We're not just, not for pride or for some, other kind of material gain, maybe subtly. And we shouldn't just, do this artificially, because then we could be called a pretender, mityachara. That's from chapter 3. If we're just, we're practicing, we're withdrawing the senses, but we keep on thinking about the things that we've withdrawn our senses from. And then the second type of sacrifice, which Prabhupada talks about, is pure spiritual activity. So I guess the best example is japa. Krishna says that japa is of sacrifices. I am japa. So this is, and certainly for us, chanting on the beads is our most important sacrifice. And And then Prabhupada says in the purport that if we can understand, if we can perform these sacrifices, then we have no problem in understanding our position after we read the Bhagavad Gita. And yes. And the other thing, which I heard in one class, about doubts and how to slash our doubts, is to follow Arjuna. Actually, in chapter 1, he was praying to Krishna as Madhusudana, the one who killed the demon Madhu. And we all have this demon in our hearts, this demon of doubt. And Krishna prayed that he would destroy this demon within his heart. And how does Krishna do that when we pray? He gives us transcendental knowledge. So in chapter 10, this Jnana Divina, the lamp of knowledge, that he destroys the darkness born of ignorance. And this ignorance, as we know from today's verse, leads to doubt and can be detrimental to our spiritual health. So it's very important that we acquire this transcendental knowledge. And Prabhupada also talks about the importance of the spiritual master. So we can pray to Krishna as Madhusudana. He's and then the spiritual master, the representative of Krishna, can destroy those doubts as well if we inquire from him. And what is the importance actually of destroying our doubts? This is something else I heard in class from Radhanath Maharaj. To the extent that we have faith, to that extent we make progress. So if we have so many doubts and we're not clearing them and our faith isn't getting stronger, then it's going to be very difficult for us to make any more progress. And yes, this process teaches us to be a warrior, to fight Maya and defeat doubts. With this weapon of knowledge, we can become a warrior and fight Maya and defeat our doubts. That's all the notes I have. I'm just going to go through the purport again, see if I missed anything. Yeah, so Prabhupada is saying that but one who performs such sacrifices with a spiritual objective or in devotional service makes a perfect sacrifice. So if we're sacrificing something for spiritual reasons, then this is the perfection of sacrifice and of the process, actually. And then again, Prabhupada is saying that if we can read Bhagavad Gita and follow, then it's very easy to get this knowledge. Very easy to understand, he says, these two important divisions of spiritual knowledge. So if we're sincerely reading Bhagavad Gita and trying to follow what Krishna is saying, then it will also be easy to understand what the spiritual knowledge. There is no. And yes, Prabhupada's saying different types of sacrifices on different levels. He's saying sacrifices to the demigods even. So he's even saying that that's on the path to attaining transcendental knowledge. Sacrifice in celibacy, in Brahman, in household life. There's all different types of sacrifice we can make, which will lead to transcendental knowledge. And he's saying to study Bhagavad Gita under the guidance of a bona fide spiritual master. This is very important, especially when we're talking about doubts, because otherwise, we can come up with all kinds of concoctions or speculations as to, what Krishna could mean if we're having doubts about what he's saying. So this is very important that we're studying under this Guru Parampara and in the association of devotees. And then he's saying the spiritual master is in disciplic succession from time eternal. That's a powerful statement. So he's always been there. And he doesn't deviate from the instructions of the Supreme Lord as they were imparted millions of years ago. So they're exactly the same. Of course, they're all using different words, but as long as the message is the same, then that will still resonate in our heart if our hearts are open to accepting it, and then we can realize it in time. Okay, I think that's all. So thank you, online viewers, if there's anyone there. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.